Zambia's president has just dropped a diplomatic bombshell, demanding that Europe and the UK refund billions in visa fees taken from Africans who were never allowed to travel. For years, Africans have been quietly paying and getting nothing but rejection. Was this just bad policy or a calculated system of exploitation? Let's find out. The quiet scandal behind Zambia's bold demand lies in a global machine few ever question: the visa industry. Not tourism, not migration, just the act of applying to visit another country. Over the years, the process has evolved from a mere checkpoint into a lucrative revenue stream, especially when it comes to African applicants. And now that industry is finally being dragged into the light. Let's start with the numbers, because the numbers don't lie. In 2024 alone, African citizens lost over $67.5 million to rejected Schengen visa applications. In the same year, the UK collected around £50 million from Africans who were ultimately refused entry. That's over $120 million quietly extracted in one calendar year, without a single plane taking off. But this isn't just a coincidence. It's not just administrative overhead. What's unfolding is a profit model, one built on the backs of hopeful travelers, students, and families from the world's most disadvantaged regions. Here's how it works. A citizen from Ghana, Nigeria, or Zambia applies for a visa to attend a conference in Brussels or visit a relative in London. They pay the full application fee upfront, 90 euros in most Schengen cases, or £115 for a UK standard visitor visa. These payments are non-refundable, regardless of the outcome. Then comes the rejection, often with no explanation, no hearing, no appeal. Just a cold sentence on an official letter. Your application has been refused. No further action can be taken. And with that, the process ends. But the fee? It's already been collected. Now multiply this by hundreds of thousands of African applicants every year, most of whom are rejected. What you get is not a diplomatic service, but a massive border-run business model, where denial equals revenue. To put it in perspective, if a fast food chain charged customers for food they never received, there would be lawsuits. If a university took tuition from students it never enrolled, there would be outrage. But somehow, European governments charging millions in fees to reject African travelers is seen as normal. Why? Because the system isn't built to deliver fairness. It's built to filter and profit, and Africans are paying more than just money. There's a psychological tax on the youth who feel undesired by the world, on families kept apart, on entrepreneurs denied the opportunity to build global partnerships. A Congolese woman was denied a medical visa. A Nigerian tech founder was rejected while trying to attend a startup summit. A Kenyan artist was invited to perform, but was denied at the last minute. These are not isolated cases, they are the norm. And here's where it becomes even more revealing. The rejection rates are highest in Africa. Comoros, Guinea-Bissau, Ghana. Some of these nations have rejection rates over 47% for Schengen visas. In contrast, applicants from the US or Japan experience rejection rates under 10%. Same forms, same fees, entirely different outcomes. Which begs the question, if this system were truly neutral, why does the rejection rate follow the global wealth divide so precisely? The answer might lie in the unspoken assumptions built into the process. African applicants are more likely to be flagged for lack of ties, risk of overstaying, or uncertain financial background. These justifications are often based on blanket stereotypes, not individual merit. And they're used to turn away applicants systematically while still retaining their money. This is not security. This is not efficient. This is economic gatekeeping with a receipt. And until now, no leader dared say it out loud. That's what makes Zambia's position so pivotal. By demanding refunds, President Hichilema isn't just calling out unfair fees. He's questioning the legitimacy of the entire process, a process where Africa pays, Europe profits, and no one takes responsibility. This demand isn't coming from a place of weakness. It's coming from a continent that has begun to recognize its leverage. African nations are home to booming markets, rare minerals, youthful populations, and growing global influence. Yet their people are treated as liabilities at European borders and charged for being insulted. So what happens when Africans finally start seeing visa policies not as gatekeeping tools, but as financial traps? What happens when the continent refuses to pay for rejection? That's the conversation Zambia has just opened, and it's only the beginning. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. When Zambia's president demanded visa fee refunds, it wasn't just about money. It was about a broken promise. For years, Africa has been told that the world is open, that global mobility is a right, that international cooperation is built on fairness and mutual respect. But if you look closely, you'll see what Africa is finally calling out. Reciprocity is a one-way street. Let's start with the obvious imbalance. Citizens of the European Union and the United Kingdom can travel to many African countries without visas at all. Zambia, for instance, welcomes UK and EU passport holders visa-free for up to 90 days. Kenya offers a visa on arrival. Ghana, Rwanda, Botswana, and several others have either waived visa requirements entirely or made it incredibly easy for Westerners to enter. Why? The reasoning has always been clear: encourage tourism, promote business, show hospitality, and demonstrate that Africa is ready for the world. And Africa delivered. Tourists were welcomed, business deals were signed, Western diplomats, investors, and celebrities entered African nations freely, often greeted with fanfare and red carpets. But what did Africa get in return? Closed doors, silent rejections, and bureaucratic suspicion. While Europeans breeze through African airports with nothing but a stamp, African travelers must endure a Kafkaesque nightmare just to apply for entry. Not to mention the humiliating documentation demands, bank statements, employment letters, invitation letters, return tickets, proof of accommodation, and even biometric data just to prove they're not a threat. And here's the punchline: most of these Africans still get rejected. So the question now becomes, if Africa opens its doors but Europe and the UK slam theirs shut, what exactly is being exchanged? This is the heart of Zambia's challenge. The continent has for decades operated under the illusion that openness breeds reciprocity, that by being generous, the world will be generous back. But the reality is far colder. Africa has been giving access while receiving none. This isn't just about tourism or travel, it's about diplomatic dignity. Because visa access is power. It determines who can attend conferences, who can do business internationally, who can access global education, and who can escape crises when needed. And when African citizens are locked out, while European citizens enjoy open skies, it sends a message loud and clear. Your freedom of movement matters. Theirs doesn't. It gets worse when you realize how this imbalance is enforced through double standards. When African countries suggest tightening their own visa rules, they're told it will harm tourism, scare off investors, or appear unwelcoming. But when Europe blocks African travelers, it's defended as security or migration management. So African nations are asked to be open for the sake of goodwill, while their people are locked out in the name of control. Zambia's call for refunds flips this dynamic on its head. It's not just saying, treat us better. It's saying, if you won't, we will reconsider how we treat you. And this is where things get geopolitical. Because if African countries begin reevaluating their visa policies, revoking visa-free entry, introducing strict screening for European nationals, or even introducing reciprocal visa fees, the West will feel it. It's not an empty threat. Africa is no longer the weak player it was decades ago. With fast-growing economies, a booming middle class, and critical raw materials needed for the global tech and green revolutions, the continent holds real leverage. And now, it's starting to use it. Already, some voices across African governments and think tanks are floating ideas once considered too radical to say aloud. Should UK and EU citizens be charged the same non-refundable fees when applying to African nations? Should African countries introduce visa quotas for European applicants, mirroring the silent quotas used against African travelers? Should diplomatic access for Western embassies be restructured until fairness is ensured? These aren't acts of retaliation. They're acts of balance, meant to restore the symmetry that global mobility has long pretended to uphold. And this moment, ignited by Zambia, is a warning that if the West continues treating African travelers as liabilities, the continent will stop offering blind hospitality in return. Because Africa has had enough of being polite while being excluded, enough of being open while being insulted, enough of offering welcome mats to countries that treat African citizens like risks. And now, a question is rising that few in London, Paris, or Brussels ever expected to hear. What happens when Africa stops being the only side playing fair? Also, if Africa opens its doors and Europe slams theirs shut, the next question is, how does Europe justify it? The answer is buried beneath layers of bureaucracy so thick, they act not just as red tape, but as a fortress. A fortress designed to confuse, stall, deny, and most importantly, never be held accountable. The power of European and UK visa systems doesn't come from open declarations of discrimination. It comes from their ability to hide behind paper. Denial is never framed as prejudice. It's masked as administrative discretion, lack of strong ties, unclear travel intent, or the all-time favorite, you might not return home. Let's break that last one down. Imagine telling an educated, employed Zambian businesswoman who submitted her financial statements, her invitation letter, her itinerary, that she might overstay her visa, so she's being denied. That's not a case-by-case decision. That's systemic bias, dressed up as policy. And it's the standard for African applicants. What makes it worse is that there's no appeal process, no accountability, no chance to clarify or argue your case. Just a cold rejection letter. And the money? Already gone. This is where the genius of the system lies. Denial without transparency. The perfect scam. There is no hearing, no trial, no obligation to explain. Just judgment and cashing the check. And for years, Africa complied. Because the game was made to look like a legitimate process. But now, the veil is lifting. What was once considered unlucky is being re-examined as deliberate policy. Not in the form of legislation, but through structures designed to work exactly as they do, to deny, extract, and silence. One of the most telling aspects of this trap is the data. If visa applications from Africa were being reviewed fairly, you would expect rejection rates to vary across professions, regions, and documentation quality. But in reality, rejection rates cluster almost identically around African countries, regardless of economic background or applicant profile. Whether you're a doctor in Ghana or a teacher in Malawi, your chances are similarly low, because the barrier isn't you, it's where you come from. This systemic approach to rejection turns visa systems into filters, not for individual behavior, but for nationality. And Africans are among the most heavily filtered. Some visa agencies have quietly admitted that certain African passports are flagged automatically for additional scrutiny, before any documents are even reviewed. It's not written in policy, but it's practiced in silence. And this silence is what allows the system to function without outrage. Because no one is directly accused, no one is directly named, and that means no one can fight back, until now. Zambia's refund demand is not just a complaint about fees. It is a spotlight on the machinery behind those fees, the opaque, unaccountable bureaucracy that exists not to evaluate fairly, but to protect itself. Let's consider the term administrative denial. It sounds harmless, something vague, maybe procedural. But in practice, it's a weapon. It gives consulates the power to reject anyone, anytime, for any reason, or no reason at all. And because these decisions aren't subject to review, they cannot be legally challenged. This creates a cruel feedback loop. African applicants overcompensate with more documentation, more interviews, more costs, only to be turned away again. And each time, the system profits. But the profit isn't just financial. There's a psychological toll. Being denied over and over without clarity breeds self-doubt. It tells Africans, you are unworthy. It teaches them that the world isn't theirs to explore, learn from, or contribute to. That their passports are symbols of suspicion, that their dreams are conditional. And that is the most dangerous part of all. Because once a person believes their identity is a disadvantage, they stop trying. They stop applying. They stop hoping. That is the true cost of this system. Not just lost money, but lost confidence, lost talent, and lost possibilities. And now, Africa is realizing it has been playing by rules that were never meant to let it win. But what happens when the people trapped in that system stop applying and start demanding change? That's the moment we're in now, and it's the moment where silence is no longer working. For decades, African nations were told they needed Europe for trade, for investment, for visas, for validation. The West built the illusion that access was a gift, and Africa was lucky to even be considered. That illusion is now crumbling. Zambia's demand for visa refunds isn't just a complaint, it's a signal, one that is beginning to wake up an entire continent. And with it comes a dangerous realization for the status quo. Africa has leverage, real, undeniable leverage. It just forgot how to use it. While African citizens are routinely denied entry to Europe and the UK, their countries are quietly holding some of the world's most powerful bargaining chips. Let's talk about raw materials. The Democratic Republic of Congo supplies over 70% of the world's cobalt, essential for batteries in smartphones, electric vehicles, and renewable energy systems. Guinea holds the largest reserves of bauxite, needed for aluminum production. Zimbabwe is rich in lithium, Ghana in gold, and South Africa in platinum and rare earths. Europe cannot achieve its green transition without African minerals. That's not speculation, that's a fact. And who controls access to those resources? African governments. Yet for years, those governments prioritized trade deals, tax incentives, and investor-friendly policies, believing that playing nice would bring respect. But respect never came. What came instead were visa denials, aid conditions, and bureaucratic arrogance. Now the tone is shifting. Quietly but surely, African leaders are beginning to rethink their relationships with the West. And it's not just about diplomacy, it's about policy. Zambia's call for refunds could easily evolve into a continent-wide visa reform movement. Imagine a unified African stance. No more visa-free entry for citizens of countries that deny African travelers without cause. No more open access to diplomats from nations that exploit African applicants. No more cooperation with embassies that treat Africa as a risk rather than a partner. These aren't wild ideas. These are natural responses. Similar discussions are already taking place within the African Union's Migration and Foreign Affairs subcommittees. The idea is simple: reciprocal mobility. If your citizens move freely in our countries, ours should move freely in yours. If you deny us access, we'll revisit the access we've given you. This is where Africa's leverage becomes obvious. Europe depends on African cooperation for more than just minerals. It needs it for military basing, migration control, trade routes, climate agreements, and diplomatic influence in the UN. And for too long, African states have given away these advantages with little in return. Now, the calculation is changing. We're already seeing early signs of this power being exercised. In 2024, Nigeria temporarily suspended visa-on-arrival privileges for several European countries, citing unbalanced diplomatic conduct. Senegal blocked a European trade delegation after controversial visa refusals to its business leaders. Kenya began talks on mirroring visa conditions with countries based on how they treat Kenyan applicants. None of these were permanent moves, but all of them were warnings. The door swings both ways. The irony? The West didn't expect this. For years, Europe and the UK assumed African countries wouldn't push back. That dependency, debt, and diplomacy would keep them compliant. But they forgot something. This isn't the Africa of the 1990s. Today's Africa is younger, smarter, and more connected. Its leaders are no longer ashamed to call out double standards. Its citizens are no longer afraid to demand fairness. And its governments are starting to act with strategic coordination, not desperation. President Hichilema's statement might have sounded like a solo complaint, but it's part of a much louder chorus. One that asks, if you keep denying our people the right to move, why should we keep letting you move freely here? This is not revenge, it's rebalancing. And the West has two choices: continue profiting from the status quo, or recognize that global mobility must be mutual, not colonial. The longer it waits, the more likely Africa will act, not just individually, but together. Because when African leaders start realizing they hold the keys to Europe's supply chains, investment routes, and diplomatic access, the visa game changes forever. Do you think Africans should stop applying for visas? Should travel to the EU and UK be banned? Let us know in the comments section. Will it solve anything? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.